Hello, my name is Jessie Van Custer from the American College of Surgeons Committee on Intimate Partner Violence. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Breaking the Cycle, What to Know About Financial Abuse. This webinar is hosted by the American Academy of Ophthalmology, the American Association of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons, the American College of Surgeons, the American Urogynecology Society, and the Society for Gynecologic Surgeons. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted onto ACS's YouTube page after the webinar. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen during the webinar to submit questions for the audience Q&A portion. You may submit these questions anonymously to our panel. With that, I'd like to now introduce you to today's moderator, Dr. Rob Todd. Dr. Todd received his Bachelor of Business Administration in Finance from the University of Texas at Austin in 1992. He then matriculated from Texas Tech University Health Science Center with a doctor in medicine in 1996. He remained at Texas Tech University, where he completed his general surgery residency in 2001. He followed that with a fellowship in trauma and surgical critical care from Oregon Health and Science University in 2003. In 2019, Dr. Todd was recruited to Grady Health System in Atlanta, Georgia, as the Senior Vice President and Chief of Acute Care Surgery. Subsequently, he assumed oversight of the perioperative services. As of July 1st, 2025, Dr. Todd assumed the role of Executive Vice President and Chief Medical Officer at the Grady Health System. With that, I'll now turn it over to Dr. Todd. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie, and thank you for joining us today for our conversation on intimate partner violence and financial abuse. Today, we will discuss what surgeons should know about financial abuse. IPV has a global presence across all genders, ethnicities, socioeconomic classes, and relationships. It affects surgeons, their friends, family members, and patients. We are joined today by Drs. Lovato, Whittington, and Ms. Sandry. First, we welcome Dr. Christine Lovato. She received her medical degree from the University of New Mexico School of Medicine and completed her surgical training at St. Joseph's Hospital and Medical Center in Phoenix, Arizona, and a fellowship in minimally invasive and bariatric surgery at Alta Bates Hospital and Medical Center in Oakland, California. She is board certified in both surgery and obesity medicine and is an assistant clinical professor for the University of Arizona Phoenix College of Medicine, where she serves as the section chief of bariatric surgery and interim medical director for obesity medicine. Next, we welcome Dr. Jennifer Whittington. Dr. Whittington is a board-certified surgical oncologist and a fellow of the American College of Surgeons who practices at Elmhurst Hospital Center in Queens, New York. She is currently the chair-elect of the Young Fellows Association Inclusive Excellence Work Group and is on the governing council of the YFA. She is a member of the Association of Women Surgeons Career Development Committee and has a keen interest in helping trainees and early career surgeons navigate unanticipated personal and professional challenges. Lastly, we welcome Paige Zandri. Ms. Zandri is the managing partner at Artis Zandri PLLC, a family law firm in Midtown Manhattan. At Artis Zandri, Paige represents clients in high conflict matters that often include instances of prolonged abuse, often in the areas of financial abuse and coercive control. Victims of financial abuse and coercive control can take back their power when facing family law matters by understanding how to anticipate, avoid, and respond to the elements of abuse that are at play even at the most incremental level. The firm works closely with clients to help them overcome and take control of these issues. Thank you all for being with us here today. I will now start the portion of the moderated Q&A session of this webinar with some questions for our panelists. And the first question is, what is financial abuse? And I'll open up these questions to all of you guys and feel free to chime in. But what is financial abuse and how would you describe that?
I'm happy to take that, Dr. Todd. Thank you so much. I think a lot of us have a different definition of this. And this is a topic that has become nearer and dearer to my heart as I've seen numerous postings from fellow colleagues all across the country that are going through similar things. And so for a lot of our colleagues, financial abuse looks a little bit different than it does for maybe some of our patients. A lot of our colleagues are well educated and have some financial stability. And so it really, I think a lot of people are led to believe that that means that we're not ever going to be victims of this. And that is so untrue. There's a lot of different levels of financial abuse. And I think seeing colleagues taking out second mortgages on their homes just to be able to afford a divorce, it's astounding to me that that is allowed to happen. And so I think it's important, that there's a lot of different definitions of it and that we address all of those today.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll just jump in, Rob, and piggyback of what Christine was saying. There are a lot of different definitions, and it can rear its ugly head in a variety of ways. From a legal standpoint, what we are looking at often is, were there dynamics in the relationship, and are there dynamics in play at the time of a breakdown of relationship where one party is really able to exert some sort of control or influence over the other party by way of using finances as leverage? And there's usually symptoms of that arise throughout the relationship, but often it comes to a head at the time of a breakdown, because that's when all of a sudden things that were not discovered while the relationship was intact start to come to the surface. And so at that point, especially if you're in a relationship where there are unequal negotiating powers, you really want to be careful in how you uncover and navigate those things. So just to circle back, really what we're looking at is a broader sort of understanding of any time where you might feel you're at a disadvantage, or you have been left in the dark and you are being controlled or coerced through those financial levers.
Yes, I'll add on to and really back up everything both of my co-panelists said, and exactly what Paige just said. There's a big factor in control and coercive control and different levels there. And one thing that I think is really important for a lot of surgeons, we're very educated. We are medical professionals. We're very good at what we do. Some of us may not have great financial education or background, and some of us are so busy in what we do from day to day. One very sneaky coercive tactic is to have a partner graciously decide to take control of the finances. And that can be a very slippery slope because it seems like a favor in the beginning. But very soon you can not know where your accounts are, what they are, what's in them. And just as Paige mentioned, if there's a breakdown anywhere, you're really behind the ball and you don't even know what you do or don't have, and can put you in a very precarious situation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Jennifer, thank you. Thank you for that input, because it kind of segues into the next question quite nicely. And what can surgeons do to protect their finances? You discussed, how you can lose track of that in those accounts. So what could surgeons do to protect their finances?
I'll start in there, and definitely would like everyone else's thoughts too. But the most important thing is know your finances, know where your accounts are, know what is in them. And this is from the bottom up: your checking account, your savings account, any credit cards. Make sure that you do a credit report check every 6 months to a year. Many financial services offer them for free to make sure that there are no credit cards being opened up in your name that you don't know about. If you have any retirement accounts or Roth accounts, all of those can factor in. So make sure that there's no money leaking out of those that you aren't aware of, because just as we mentioned earlier, if there's any element of coercive control going on, some of that can be very clandestine tactics to drain money that you may not even know that you're losing.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I think what Dr. Whittington mentioned about keeping an eye on your credit is hugely important. That's such a covert way to be able to access cash, credit in another person's name, and potentially not be on the hook for it. But I wanted to also add, one of the ways that we like to suggest protection in the dynamic that Dr. Whittington was mentioning, where if you do sort of relinquish control, because many high achievers have to do that. You are very busy in your career, and you do rely on your partners to come to make up for the things that you aren't able to do when you are so career focused. And so if you find yourself in a dynamic where you feel uncomfortable saying, hey, where are our bank accounts? What did we file our tax returns? One of the things that we like to suggest to parties is to involve a neutral. So one of the ways you can gently approach that topic is say, hey, you know what? I really like the idea of getting a financial planner involved. And you bring your partner into those conversations, and the financial planner, as part of the process, will require disclosure of the assets, of the debts, of the income, of the expenses. And now you are in a neutral, safe space to have conversations and become educated on what your finances are. And the likelihood of things being hidden starts to shrink. And your engagement in the conversations and your ability to become educated about how those conversations go, how investments are made, how your money is managed, it becomes a learning process for you out in the open with your partner, and hopefully change the dynamic for you. And that's one way you can start to protect yourself, is start to bring in other professionals who are non-threatening to work with you through the planning and protection process.
Thank you so much for that, Paige. So on to the next question. If you're leaving your partner, what should you know about leaving that marital home? You know, when you're leaving your home, what should you know about that process, how to undertake that, and how to safeguard yourself?
I'm happy to answer, but I don't want to monopolize the panel here. Well, first, of course, if your physical safety is in danger, leaving the house becomes an immediate need, and the rest of the issues can be resolved later. And I'm leaving out, protection and custody of children right now, and sticking to finances. That's a whole nother very complicated topic to broach. Our preference would be that if you don't need to leave the house, we would always encourage people to have an agreement, at least a temporary agreement in place with your partner, to understand whether or not you would be entitled to some sort of financial support in order to begin living separately, when you will be able to have access to cash. You want to be able to understand those things before you leave the house, because otherwise, unless you have some sort of financial independence, you really will find yourself working out from behind a situation rather than trying to get in front of it. Again, that's like barring any physical violence or any real threat to your safety.
Excellent. Do either of the other panelists have any thoughts or comments beyond that?
Sure, I'll chip in. I think agree with everything that Paige said, but also knowing what your mortgage looks like, what any leasing agreements look like, and doing your very best to make sure your name is on any documentation, and having copies or even the physical document of any deeds, mortgage documentation, or lease, because in the event that anything ever happens, that the locks are changed or you're left out of the home, you can't get back in, and that's a problem. And I can certainly speak to my own experience. I was fortunate enough to have subsidized housing during a portion of my training, was asked to leave the home that my name was in because it would be easier for me to live closer to the hospital. And my intuition said that just didn't sound right. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because if your name is actually on a lease or some sort of housing like that, and you leave and somebody else stays in it, everybody gets evicted. Then nobody has a residence. So it's really important to know your rights to stay in your own residence, and how things work. And again, these were things that I was extremely uneducated about, and was very fortunate to gain education from my legal counsel, and just learning from the school of hard knocks.
Thank you for that, Jennifer. So on to our next question. What would you say is the most common mistake individuals make regarding their financial security when filing for divorce? And how can they protect themselves from that?
I can go ahead and start, Jennifer, if you, I can tell you the mistake I made. is I trusted. And that sounds so terrible, right? I trusted that my partner at the time would do the right thing. I trusted that things would be fair. I trusted that the family court system would back me up if things became unfair. And I learned the difficult way that that is not always the case. And so when my family attorney advised me to take half of everything that we had in liquid assets, I allowed my partner at the time to guilt me into not doing that, right? Because they had a business, they had a lot of things going on where things needed to be financed quickly and liquidity and all of these things. And I did not want to ruin any chances of them being able to do their business. And that's after 25 years together, right? And so I realized, too late that they were not going to uphold that same agreement. And so just listen to your attorney. You do what they say. They've been through this so many times. Your emotions will always want to take over. But yeah, don't trust in any part of the system. The system is very overburdened right now, and probably will be that way for some time.
Yes, I can absolutely commiserate with you, Christine, on that. We work in a healthcare industry where we want to trust and give people the benefit of the doubt, and I really sincerely believe the person you marry is not the same person you divorce, and it's a very challenging undertaking, and it can, like you said, it can be very emotional. But one thing that was really striking to me, and just like you said, family court is not fair. And one thing that really impressed me, especially going through the New York court system, it's expensive. It's very expensive. And it's almost like pay to play. And I had a very well meaning colleague who said, they knew that I was going through this. And they said, I'll be a character witness for you. And that was endearing, but I didn't need a character witness. Everyone knew I was a good person and a good mom and, did right by people. But if you don't have the finances to maintain yourself in family court and to pay your legal counsel, you don't get representation. And just as you mentioned, and I can certainly speak for myself, I didn't know anything about any of this. And having wonderful legal counsel who knew what they were doing and had been through this before and knew how to navigate it was paramount in being able to protect myself and my family.
I have to agree, unfortunately, with the doctors that justice is not always served through the court system. Family law matters are especially difficult because they're really not they're really not matters that should be resolved in a courtroom anyway. And the courts are ill-equipped for that dynamic. It is a very harsh reality that we try to navigate around. But I just can't emphasize enough what's already been said. The mistake you think you could make is not taking enough time to find the team that's right for you, and that's different for everyone. Not everybody the bulldog is not the shark attorney is not the right attorney for everyone, and it's important to know who you are, what your goals are, and finding the right lawyer, for those things.
Paige, I really appreciate that. And it really kind of ties in that trust concept that Christine talked about. You have to trust the individuals you're going to be working with and relying on to have your back, especially in those areas that we don't know. So I appreciate that. Talking a little bit further about with divorce, how can you protect your retirement accounts? What are means with which you can safeguard those retirement accounts that might be coming to you?
Well, so in New York, the retirement assets, unless you have a prenup or a different agreement, that would have a different outcome, according to those terms, essentially the retirement assets that accumulate during the marriage, a lot of people are surprised to learn, are shared assets, right? So what you need to understand, and Dr. Wington sort of referred to this earlier, is have loans been taken against your partner's retirement assets without your knowledge? What's the real value of those assets? And what are the gains and losses of those retirement assets while the divorce is pending, and making sure that you capture the true value of all that you're entitled to. Because, retirement assets come in many forms. Some of them are pre-tax, some of them are post-tax. You want to understand the differences between them, understand the differences between a 401k and your rights to perhaps a pension interest, which can be very, very different. So it's a little nuanced, and you want to be able to look at statements for your assets and your partner's assets, again, to see what the full value and the activity has been in the account during the marriage.
Not any different in many other states, unfortunately, and not an answer that people like to hear, but very important for them to understand. That would be considered community property.
Christine, I appreciate you said that, because that was going to be my next question for Paige. Was like, obviously, I don't expect you to know all the states, but I assume that's a pretty common standard across the states as far as common property. And so
That's correct. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So another question, and taking a little bit of a turn, how does the court handle the burden of discovery when one spouse is stalling?
This is one of the places where parties get very frustrated and a little disenchanted with the judicial process, because it cuts both ways. The divorce courts and the family courts are courts of equity, which means that deadlines can be broken, and they can be broken more than once. And sometimes they're broken so often that, in the court's effort to be fair and to give everybody as much time as they need, the situation becomes unfair for the other side. So what we try to do is we try to get around non-compliance by sending subpoenas. As Dr. Whittington suggested, it can get expensive, but there are ways to discover assets when one party is not being transparent. It just depends on how litigious you're prepared to get.
I can speak to my personal experience as well. For everyone listening, this is going to be important for you to hear. I am still working on getting divorced. I am 5 years out. And my former partner is on lawyer number 8. And so stalling tactics can be done, and then they can be a whole other level. And the struggle with subpoenas and everything, not only do you have responsibility for paying your attorney to submit those subpoenas, but if you want to enforce them, you also have to pay an attorney to enforce those. And so it becomes nearly impossible, because you are the sole financer of this, of this work. And it's really, really tough for the courts too, because obviously the bandwidth is just not there. For us, I ended up getting assigned a special master to my case. The really complicated, high asset cases tend to be that way. I can only do as much as my special master also rules. And it's an attorney in our town. And, they're great and they have a great reputation. There's a lot of forgiveness given for the stalling tactics. And I'm astounded by that, but we're stuck with it.
One thing that I think is interesting and I can speak to personally is, I divorced in 2018, early 2018, and I didn't understand the concept of post-divorce financial abuse, and it's very much a thing. I myself initially did not petition for child support, and in fact didn't for 6 years. And even when I did, like we discussed, there are stall tactics that can be enacted. But additionally, little things add up, like having a co-parent refuse for a child to participate in extracurriculars because they don't want to pay for part of it. And these little things, like paying for extracurriculars or paying for little treats that the child may, want to participate in. And it gets to the point where it's just not worth the mental or emotional turmoil of trying to request and request, and you just pay it. And it's often easier just to go ahead and pay for it, but that in and of itself it's financial abuse. It's coercive. And it happens to a lot of people. And just as Rob said earlier, this doesn't discriminate. It can happen to men, it can happen to women, every gender, ethnicity, and profession. Just something to be aware of.
Thank you guys for that. And switching a little bit back to what we were talking about before, when you are leaving a partner, how important is it to get a forensic accountant? Or, what is the value of a forensic accountant in some of those situations?
There are going to be situations that it's necessary. I think those are probably few and far between, or I could be wrong. Paige would probably know a lot more than I. I have two, and they are exceedingly expensive. But they have been the only thing that has allowed me to be able to get to the point where the minimal amount of discovery that my ex-partner has disclosed, I can actually value, something that can be put forth for a trial. So that's the reason we haven't gone to trial, is because the delay in the discovery has been so substantial. And so, if you are worried at all about hidden accounts, if you find that there's been some lying or withholding of the truth in regards to your finances, I think that's a really good reason to at least have a forensic accountant look into your case. They may find nothing and they may determine that it's not necessary for you, but at least getting to speak with them and understanding some of the things that they are looking for that would be red flags is important.
I would tend to agree with Dr. Lovato in that it's not a first step. I don't think it's usually, it's very expensive. It's very expensive. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars to get started. And it's very necessary when you have it's very necessary when you have small, closely held businesses, when you have cash businesses, when you have large transactions and a lot of transactions, maybe several accounts, or sometimes we have clients who have 10, 12, 20 accounts, and money has been going back and forth for years, and it's impossible to pull apart and understand. You would probably benefit from having a forensic in that case. It's whenever assets are being hidden, obviously. It can also come into play when one party is claiming that they cannot afford support, or they need more support, or they're claiming they don't owe you as much support as they should be paying, and you may need a forensic to help you come up with a lifestyle analysis. So this is also important when one party is able to shelter income and is not reporting income. And so what you have to do is you have to sort of back into the analysis to understand how much does our marital lifestyle cost? And we're talking everywhere from mortgage payments to birthday gifts and birthday parties for the children. We're talking commuting expenses down to the granular level, and we add it all up and we understand, okay, how much income do you have to be earning to afford this lifestyle? And then we can calculate support based on that. So forensics can be hugely valuable in those instances, but as already mentioned, it's very expensive and usually only necessary, or hopefully only necessary, if you do find yourself down the path toward trial.
Excellent. Jennifer, did you want to say something, or?
No, I agree with everything my co-panelists have said, and it's all spot on.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys all for your candidness and your willingness to be so transparent in answering those questions. And this kind of takes us more to the Q&A portion of the webinar from the audience. And we have some great questions that have already come in. As a reminder of our audience members, if you'd like to submit a question, go in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And these can be anonymous. And so I'll start going through these questions. And the first one may be best for Paige, but I'm interested to hear what everyone says. But it involves prenups. How good are prenups at offering protection in a marriage or a second marriage, possibly?
They're great. I love prenups. I speak about prenups all the time. They're a huge part of what I do at the firm. And I found that over the course of the years in which I've been doing this, they're becoming so much more common, especially with young couples and especially with couples going into their second marriages. It's so valuable for people who have children from a prior marriage, who have established careers, who perhaps have a home or some retirement assets, have started a business, or maybe think they might start a business at some point during their lives. For all of those reasons, a prenup is such a cost-efficient way to take agency over your life, because these are huge these are huge contracts. When you're getting married, you are entering into a contract to financially support someone and to accept their financial support. I mean, that's really what's going on there. And a prenup allows you to write the terms of that arrangement. I think they're wonderful.
Next question talks a little bit about therapy or spending money on therapy. So perhaps you start seeking therapy, going through this process. Can that affect your outcome in court? Could your partner's lawyer bring that up and maybe be seen as frivolous or something that might affect the settlement? Or you should be thinking about that if you're seeking therapy.
I'll be
Go ahead,
happy to
Dr.
answer this one. If anything, some of the best advice that I got, because I was initially a little reticent to seeking therapy at the beginning of my divorce, and some really good advice that I got is go to therapy so it can be documented that you're sane. Because lots of ugly things happen in court, and accusations can be very challenging and untrue. And I can certainly speak to my first experience being, in front of a judge and affidavits going back and forth. And I was extraordinarily upset when some really ugly, untrue things were said about me. But I was very happy that I had gone to a therapist because there was very clear documentation that none of those things happened, nor would anything like that happen. And none of those records were ever retrieved. However, had my lawyers ever need any kind of proof that it wasn't true or that I was clearly a very stable, sane person, that can actually, if anything, help you in court. So I think I would be a proponent of seeking therapy. One, because it's helpful. It's such a challenging situation to go through, and I think you need that third party support just as you work through it yourself, but also as a protective measure, to show that you are stable, you have a stable household, and you're stable enough to maintain your job and your family.
That being said, there are so many macro and micro traumas that occur through this process. Don't wait till the end to start healing from them. Yeah.
If I can backstop that, I couldn't agree more. And what we will say is anytime we represent a client and the other side makes an allegation, it doesn't matter, mental health, substance abuse, any sort of sordid allegation like that, the first thing we do, great, well, let's do an evaluation, because we are going to dispel that myth right away. So yes, I couldn't agree more. Like, great, please see a therapist. That therapist is going to do nothing but help this situation. Yeah.
Thank you guys for that. This next question is fairly direct, and it reads, if your partner is sick and taking out credit card after credit card and racking up over $1 million in debt, is there a way to protect yourself and your grown children short of divorce of a 30-year marriage?
Wow. That's really tough. Paige might be the right person to answer that.
Protect yourself. I'm assuming by that what is meant is not be responsible for that credit card debt. The truth is the creditors don't care. The creditors will come after any assets that person's name is on, including joint assets. So unfortunately, in terms of the relationship with the creditor and your rights against the creditor, no, there is really no way to protect yourself other than to divide your assets and perhaps get them if you can. And I have to disclaim this by saying this is not really legal advice, but like the only way I could imagine is if the person whose name the debt is in, if all of the assets are out of that person's name. It's not a solution. It's not a bulletproof solution because, again, like the courts let's say, for instance, American Express were to file a lawsuit to collect a $100,000 credit card debt, for example. Um, if American Express could prove that before filing the lawsuit, $100,000 in assets were moved out of the defendant's name to try and get out of having to pay this debt, that's something that would be considered. So I'm getting a little bit into the weeds, but it is a really difficult situation, and you really would want to speak to a lawyer.
Thank you for that, Paige. And this kind of ties in nicely. And I think, Christine, you talked earlier about trust, and then Paige, you were speaking about the importance of finding an attorney that you trust and are comfortable with. How do you best identify that attorney, without spending too much money and time or effort to find the right attorney? And maybe I think Christine and Jennifer, you guys might have the lived experience, but Paige, I'd be curious to start with you if you don't mind.
We give free consultations. I think that that's a litmus test for if I were a consumer of legal services, I would be reluctant to pay a lot of money for a consultation. I think it's an interview on both sides. Even as a lawyer, I want to know who the client is. I want to understand if it's worth my time to spend 30 minutes for free to understand the client, understand the issues, and whether we're going to be the right fit for them. So I would say try to get as many free consultations as you can, and that's just a personal opinion. As a practice, we think it's good practice to give free consultations. It's an interview on both sides, and I would do as many of those as you can do in a shortest period of time as possible.
I can certainly speak to my experience with this. And when I first embarked on this journey, I was a trainee. You don't make a lot of money as a trainee. And if things are moving in a direction that you see that you're going to need to go to court or have a trial, and and I'll say this as a millennial, if the vibe check is that they're not helping you or they're not going to be invested in helping you, or they're asking for substantial amounts of money that there's no way that you can pay, you can get very honest advice with other legal counsel within that city or area and find an attorney who's going to be a better fit and who will best represent the interest of yourself and your family.
Thank you guys for that. This next question, it's talking about hidden assets, and it says hidden assets are concerned, but is there an ethical, legal way to squirrel away assets if you're the sole income earner and you're concerned about needing potential funds for legal action? So how do you start? Is there a way with which you can retain your assets and protect yourself moving forward, knowing that you might need those resources going forward?
I mean, go ahead.
Please, Dr. Lovato, I defer to you. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's plenty of legal ways probably to put assets away in your name. Whether or not those are going to be discoverable at your divorce proceedings, that's a completely different story, right? Ethically, sure. I mean, we all can question ethics, right? In regards to all of this, we all think we're ethical when we're doing these things. Sometimes we're doing them because we think we're defending ourselves. Sometimes we're doing them because we're angry. I mean, we're all human. So I won't answer to that part, but yeah, everything becomes discoverable. And if that other person chooses to investigate those, then there's really no way to hide them in any reasonable manner.
That's true. All of that is true. And Dr. Lovato, I will just revisit something you had mentioned. You had mentioned that you had gotten advice to take half of the values of the accounts. That's advice that we might give to a client in a similar situation, because you are entitled to half of the balance. So if you take half, there's nothing, there are really no, like if we just limit the scenario to this scope and not any other extraneous facts, there are really no real risks in the eyes of the court, or penalties or consequences for taking half. And I agree that before a lawsuit is filed, before a divorce is filed, you are You can open up accounts. You can have your income deposited to an account in your own name. You can reroute those direct deposits. None of that is illegal, but it will all be discoverable. So in the end, it will be accounted for one way or another.
Thank you guys for that. This question is talking about it starts with another way to leave a marriage is via death, but what the person is really getting at is they have a partner who's not interested in finances or understanding their finances and the situation of what they look like financially. They state they're relatively comfortable in retirement and have a trust in place, but worry a great deal about the lack of appreciation or interest in finances and what that looks like going through retirement. Any thoughts or suggestions? This is a tough one. And Paige, I'm looking at you. I'm sorry, but
Are
I don't
you?
know if
Are
this.
you?
I mean, obviously, Christine,
Well,
Jennifer, you guys have thoughts, but I don't know if this may be more legal.
um, well, actually, I thought it was maybe I misunderstood the question because it seemed I thought you were asking something that was a little less legal. Let me make sure. Let me rephrase. What we're asking is, what do you do with how do you handle a partner who's really not interested in participating in financial planning as part of the relationship dynamic? Is that
Yeah, I
what's
think that's what we're getting at. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So that's a communication and motivation issue in my mind. I don't know, Jennifer and Christine, do you see that any differently? Like that's something that I would consider discussing either again with the assistance of a financial planner or maybe even a couples counselor.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways that you can put another signer on your trust account. For example, if you're worried about who's going to manage the finances for your children when you're gone, if you're
Mm.
gone. But I think legally, the fact that they are the biological parent still, I think it essentially makes it that they would automatically get the opportunity to do that regardless. I could be wrong.
I appreciate everything you both said, and without sounding trite, I think it's important to acknowledge someone's going to be as educated as they want to be. And I do hope that in this situation, this person will invest themselves in trying to learn more about the finances, because it's a much scarier endeavor when it's not a choice, when you don't have time and freedom to find that. And I've found a number of books and White Coat Investor and a number of social media handles that I think do a good job of teaching basic financial education that many of us don't get in training or, in background and from families. So the information and educational resources are out there if we seek them.
Thank you, guys. This ties back to one of the earlier questions. We talked about prenups. What about postnups?
They are essentially the same. It's exactly what it sounds like. It covers all the same issues, all the same enforceability, but you're executing the agreement after you get married. And that's relevant. Some people will say, well, why would I want to do that? Some people you'll do it because a life event occurred. Sometimes that life event means I left my job and I'm going to start a business. And I might liquidate my retirement asset to do that. And my spouse is really uncomfortable with that. So how are we going to make sure that each of us is protected? And let's talk about that. Sometimes it's a little more emotional and there's a breakdown in the relationship and one party or both parties are saying, hey, we're going to try and we're going to work on this and we're going to work toward reconciliation. But as a bridge to that goal, let's lock down what our financial obligations are to one another. So that, and it often is when I call it a bridge because it often allows people to relax and get into their emotions and start to allow themselves to be vulnerable and open up communication with the other party to reach the actual issue because the finances has been resolved. Like we've dealt with that and we don't have to worry about that falling out from under us. And if this doesn't work out, we have it all sorted.
Thank you for that. This question really is talking about how do you handle unknown creditors? So hypothetically, if you have creditors who lent your partner money in the past or gave them loans or whatnot, and you find out about those after the decree, and now they're coming after community property, and your partner's filed for bankruptcy already. So now you're the sole person who may have assets with which they could come after. Is there a way to handle that?
Um, I don't, again, I don't want to monopolize the panel, but if you're already divorced, you've gotten the decree, then the creditors of your spouse cannot reach your assets at that point. So you will be protected.
Excellent. Good to know. This individual has been divorced over 20 years ago and continues to provide spousal support. They're approaching retirement, and it keeps delaying their retirement because they do provide that spousal support. Are there any ways to decrease or stop spousal support upon reaching retirement?
The ways to modify your obligations would require what we call a change in circumstances. And we actually, it's a higher standard. It's called a substantial change in circumstances. In order to meet that standard, you generally have to establish that something has occurred that you would not have anticipated. Okay, so if you agreed to pay spousal support for a duration that extends beyond how long you want it to work or extends beyond your desired retirement age, the courts won't always honor that as a substantial change in circumstances if it was something that you could have or should have contemplated when you agreed to the obligation at the time of the divorce.
I just want to add, these questions are fantastic. I mean, there are a number of things that I wouldn't have considered, and I think they're very pertinent and engaging.
Another question, once you're divorced, is if you have any new income that you generate, is that yours alone, or do you have any obligations to your ex at that point in time?
The only time that would come into play is if it would impact child support. So if you have an ongoing child support obligation and for whatever reason you have language in your agreement that allows you to recalculate child support, then an increase in income or a decrease in income could impact that calculation.
And this question ties a little into that, I think, possibly, but it says, can you maximize directing assets to your children or beneficiaries to reduce the percentage to your spouse or ex in that perspective?
A lot of people, it's an interesting thing, and it's not a terrible idea, right? Most of the time, the answer is you and your spouse have to agree to that arrangement. Otherwise, those assets are considered marital, and unless they're completely out of your name. So even sometimes assets that are placed in 529 plans are, if the other party doesn't agree to keep them for the children, they could be divided. Parents are not doing that often unless the financial strain is severe. But another thing you could do is you can use trust instruments as a way to put assets in your children's name. Again, trusts can be revocable, they can be irrevocable, and whether it's one or the other can have an impact on the treatment of whatever's placed in that trust. But there are some things that can be done.
Thank you. And then I think we'll take one last question. How does the IRS handle a case in which there is an inequitable tax burden?
Oh, I can speak to this. Unfortunately. So having had a former partner who did not file taxes regularly or in a timely fashion, it became a real issue once we were separated and I was trying to file on my own. What I learned through the course of all of this is please, if there's complicated things going on with this, get a tax attorney. It has been a lifesaver for me, and they are fantastic in helping me navigate this. On top of that, the IRS right now really is short-staffed. So being able to actually find a person to work with you, a human being to speak to, is nearly impossible, even for my attorney. And they used to work for the IRS, and their wife currently works for the IRS. So, I mean, they have an in, and it's still really hard. That being said, so there is something called filing for innocent spouse tax relief. It is something that can be done. It's just a simple form, so you can do it that way online. But if you have an attorney do it for you and gather all of the background data that you need to prove that case, it's much more efficient and much more likely that you'll get approved for it. My ex-partner filed it against me for 2 tax years that they just didn't want to pay. And of course, it was denied. I filed it because they had 20 different LLCs in their name, and was moving money around left and right and had not filed for those LLCs. And so I was able to obtain tax relief for those years, which was substantial for me. It cost me about $5,000 to save probably close to $100,000 in taxes that I could have been responsible for. So that is definitely worth it. And I'll leave it to the rest of the panel to answer.
I will say if you have filed and if you signed a joint tax return and filed it, and there have been misrepresentations on that joint tax return, it's it can be a prickly situation. So you really want to, I mean, that's a great opportunity to enforce or assert yourself at around tax filing time and say, great, I'm ready to sign. I just need to understand what this is, what this says, because it's a legal document and you are essentially, it's the equivalent of taking an oath when you sign it. You're asserting that the information is accurate that's being reported there. So I'll just repeat, it's a wonderful time to get some clarity and some transparency on the finances.
Definitely. I agree with everything you both said. And I think understanding all of your divorce documents from the decree to any child support agreements, understanding if there are alternate years of filing, which year each co-parent will claim the child is really important, and also filing in a timely manner to make sure that the co-parent is not claiming the child on years that you should, because that can become a real burden to have to go back and fix that after the fact.
Great point. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. And Jennifer, I agree with you. Those are some amazing questions, it's incredibly eye-opening. And so I really appreciate all our participants who submitted questions. I'll ask the panel, do you guys have any concluding comments or thoughts as we get close to wrapping up?
I can say thank you for moderating, and thanks to the co-panelists and the ACS. I think this is such an important topic. And as we've all mentioned, there's a lot of interest around it, and a number of people post anonymously in groups. So it's really an issue. But I think for the ACS to support this shows that we shouldn't stigmatize this, and it limits shame and gives us an open forum and a safe space to talk about a really important issue.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Having the opportunity to talk about this and to talk about numerous topics that the Interpersonal Violence Committee has been doing at the college, it's fantastic. And it's nice to be able to help everybody remember that we are human and we are going through things that could potentially affect our careers and our futures and even our patients. And so this is such a hugely important topic. So again, thank you all for participating.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here with each of you. Obviously, from the questions, this is a topic that is pervasive. None of us is alone in this. And if I could leave you with one parting thought, it's that you do need a squad by your side. Don't hesitate. None of us can do this alone. So we need to ask for help. And that's one of the things that we, as high achievers, I think, struggle with the most. So we're here and we're here to help.
That's great. And Paige, I'd like to thank you for your expertise from the legal side. That was incredibly helpful and insightful. And you provided a perspective that obviously we physicians don't have. So really thank you for that.
Anytime.
And then to Christine and Jennifer, honestly, thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable. You know, I mean, this is not easy, and you guys both have lived experience. So you really have a very unique perspective that not everyone has. And so I really appreciate you guys coming on this podcast to be able to have that comment. So thank you so much from that perspective. In order to wrap up, I'd just say thank you as we present and disseminate this information to the surgical community. And then I'll turn it back over to Jesse for some last comments from the American College of Surgeons.
Thank you again to our panel and Dr. Todd for moderating. I echo all of your guys' sentiments and really appreciate the time and information that you shared with us. To those that are reviewing, you may access more intimate partner violence resources through the ACS website by scanning the QR code on your screen. Additionally, my contact information is on the screen. If you have any questions about the Committee on Intimate Partner Violence or any comments, questions, or feedback for our panel. And lastly, as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and we'll put it up on the ACS YouTube channel this week if possible. Thank you all again for coming, and we hope that you have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.